This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. With me this week, two pretty alright guys, Brian Murray.
Hello.
And Nick White.
Hey.
Thank you both for joining me this week. I mean, I said that you're alright. You guys are actually pretty fantastic human beings. It's been a crazy week for me. I just want to say I just got back from FlameCon yesterday. I saw some incredible people. I was a little, mentally overwhelmed with how much cool shit there was and just how many people there were. For what I consider a pretty small convention, this place was packed. I went to Mocha Fest a year or two ago, which is this very small, super indie comics, from my understanding, New York focused kind of thing or East Coast kind of thing. And that place was packed to the brim, to the point where I could only spend an hour there because there were so many people. This was almost how packed FlameCon was, which isn't to say that's a bad thing, but to see honestly the largest LGBT focused comic book convention in the United States, super packed with people from all walks of life, was the coolest thing in the world. And there were so many amazing people there. I had to resist buying a bunch of stuff, but I did get a bunch of enamel pins. I know this is what I should be saying in my how I've been reading comics, whatever, but man, I just gotta say, if you get a chance to come to New York City for FlameCon next year in 2020, you honestly should take up that offer, because holy shit, it's such a cool convention. Every single person there is so nice. There's none of the weird, awkward stuff that I think you get at a lot of bigger conventions. Instead, it's just a lot of really wholesome folks that it's very sexy stuff, but it's a lot of people that are very wholesome in general, very nice, really easy to talk to. So I just had to put that out there. But let me ask the question I ask every single week. How have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Nick.
Things have been fine. I think this is my first show back since our break, so it's interesting to not actually be talking about Ice Cream Man. I feel like I feel like that it's sort of a real pivot for me to not actually be discussing, the machinations of the Ice Cream Man / werewolf being / weird spider thing on the back of an asteroid / everything else that he's been. So this is a real change for me.
Yeah.
In terms of what I've read, I finally got around to reading Livewire number 5. I know some of you are probably saying, "Hey Nick, isn't that book on number 9?" And
it is,
and you would be correct. I've been putting this book off, I think partially because I was really nervous to see, and again, this is written by Vita Ayala, art by Kano. I think he handles colors and everything, and I think I was really nervous to see Kano fill the shoes of Raul Allen and Patricia Martin, which was foolish of me because I've seen Kano's work before. He did a great job with The Delinquents. He recently did a fantastic job with the Quantum and Woody reboot written by Daniel Kibblesmith. So I don't know why I was nervous. I think part of it was just that I have Raul Allen and Patricia Martin on just such a high pedestal that even really, really trusted, competent other pencilers, I'm kind of we'll see. But
yeah, I mean, understandably so. I mean, Raul Allen and Patricia Martin are stupendous. Please give me 1,000 books with them on it, because they're fantastic.
Yeah, and I forgot that Kano's style in some ways is actually not that far off from theirs. He has a real penchant and ability for crazy, unconventional panel work. He's used to using a very bright and wide and large color palette. So I really liked that it felt like this arc didn't feel like a real jarring one, aesthetically speaking. The writing was solid as always, but I was worried, of course, about the art. But they sort of let Kano follow the same color palette without worrying as much about shoehorning his aesthetic into being something it's not. So I was really happy with that. Yeah, this all happened because I went into my shop a few weeks ago. It had been a couple weeks. And when I got there, I found Livewire 6 and Livewire 8. And when I got home, I found Livewire 7 from the last time I had been to the shop. So if any of our listeners want to explain what they think happened, please do. I've been losing sleep over this one.
Please
so
send all
weird.
conspiracy theories to ircb@gmail.com.
Please do. It's so weird. It's so weird. What else? I read Psylords #2. Again, this is Fred Van Lente's Valiant book. Written by Fred Van Lente, art by Renato Guedes, lettering by Dave Sharp. And again, we're following these 4 characters: Tank, Beacon, Hazard, and Artisan. For those who don't really remember me discussing this book before, like the 2-sentence pitch would be 4 humans find themselves in a space jail, period. They also have powers, ? I guess that would probably be it. One of them seems to basically be a Green Lantern, another one's the Hulk. This other one is just mad as hell, and then the other one has some weird light powers. Anyway, it's very weird. I appreciate that. It's kind of hard to see where this book is going. It still has Fred Van Lente's signature sense of humor, but it's also sort of a dramatic mystery, and I appreciate it when a writer that's largely known for comedy understands that, like, sometimes it's not the place to just go joke heavy and sort of pull it back. And Fred Van Lente's definitely done this with this work. We see in this issue, we saw them break out of this space prison only to end up in what I can sort of best describe as like an outer ring of the space prison, where they discover that there are other gangs of individuals that also were given powers, and it's now more or less a turf war against these other gangs of people who have also been brought here. And when they try to go get their ship to leave, they find out their ship's energy is being siphoned off to power a nearby star. As we've all watched Dude, Where's My Car? It's basically that. So now it's basically a gang, prison, turf warfare sort of story between our 4 humans and then another gang, which is basically, it looks like a gang of hairless cats that are wearing robes like monks, and another one that are floating bipedal humanoid-ish people if they had the faiths of Cthulhu, and they're called the Widowers. This book is crazy. Did I mention that?
It sounds a little berserk, insane.
I'm enjoying it, but I don't know where it's going, and I think as I've matured as a comic book reader,
I don't believe that
I've
for a
come to
second.
appreciate that more than be frustrated by it.
Gotcha. Wowzer. So everyone should check out Psylords. That's what it sounds like to me. I mean, how much of the Valiant universe do you really need to know to jump into Psylords?
Great question. I'm glad you asked that, Michael. I would say none. At this point, none.
Okay.
The old Psylords was kind of built on the back of the hardcore. It was sort of like taking the hardcore from the modern Valiant universe and shifting it into the 4000 AD universe. Mm-hmm. But in a lot of interviews, Fred Van Lente was like, look, I am not beholden to what has come before me. And we know that I think this book is modern day. It's not a forward shifting book into the futureverse.
Okay.
And yeah, as far as I've seen so far, there are no connections to the broader Valiant universe. So that works for readers.
I mean, this sounds like a Valiant equivalent of like the Marvel cosmic universe, that, like, you know, where you've got like big stories happening in the current day situation, but just way out in space. That's completely unrelated, and maybe one day it'll come back and get related. But
that's
for
exactly
now, it's like
what I was going to say. It's completely unrelated until the day that they decide to smash the cosmic universe with the main one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, cool. I mean, that sounds. I think I'm going to grab this in trade because I do like Fred Van Lente's writing, and this book just sounds very cool. Brian, what about you? How have you been? How have comic books been?
I've been good. I've been playing a lot of tabletop RPGs lately. Like, I've currently got a Starfinder game that I'm playing in, a Starfinder game that I'm running, and a 5th Ed D&D game that I'm playing in. So,
nice.
My cup kind of runneth over there.
I get that.
I have not been a very good comics boy of late. I have a stack of comics in my, like, to-read comics on my coffee table that is approaching structural integrity issues. Like it's going to collapse or just crash through my glass top coffee table. Unless I just fucking read my comic books. I did.
For those of you who are tracking Brian's timeline of reading comics, there was a point at which he had read all of his backlog.
Yeah.
Something happened, and now we're here.
And the thing that happened is that I play video games.
Yeah.
I play a lot of video games. Oh, I got the new new to me, God of War yesterday.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, I'm trying to figure out which button makes you a good dad. And so far, it's none of them. I tore a zombie in half, though. That was cool.
Very cool. Very cool.
I did find time to read Life is Strange number 7. That's kind of that intersection of comic books and video games where I live. There's a character who's been introduced in the second arc of this comic who has a power similar to but different from Max's, where he can't affect time, but he can essentially make himself go unnoticed. And
I have that ability, Brian. I picked that up in middle school.
Trust me, Nick, nobody ever fails to notice you.
Not anymore.
His power manifested when he and his best friend were in a dangerous situation, which is exactly how Max got her powers, when her friend Chloe was being shot in the bathroom. So I think that's really fascinating. It's a parallel between their two stories that otherwise have almost nothing in common. So I think that this book is starting to examine those powers a little bit more closely. They're starting to look into, how do our powers work, what gave them to us, where they come from, which is super fascinating to me. So I'm excited to see where that goes. Unfortunately, they're also introducing some drama between Max and Chloe, which makes my heart hurt.
Of course. It wouldn't be Life is Strange without drama, right?
Yeah, that's probably why I love it so much, because I'm, a messy bitch.
Brian, there's 3 games at this point. Do I have that right?
Yes, there's the original Life is Strange. There is Life is Strange Before the Storm, which is a
following
prequel.
The same protagonists, right?
One of the same protagonists, yeah. Right. It's all about Chloe while Max was living in Seattle. And then Life is Strange 2 is a complete divergence.
And where does this fall into all of that?
The comics are pretty much unrelated. Life is Strange Dust, the first arc, picks up a year after the end of the first game. But at the end of that arc, Max essentially realizes that, she wasn't so much drifting through time as she was jumping between realities. And so at the end of Dust, she's essentially trying to get back to her, she's trying to find the reality that fits, is I think how they explain it, or the one that feels like home.
Aren't we all? Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of fun. If you're a fan of the video games, you'll definitely like the books.
Cool. Well, I already kind of gave my background as to what I've been doing. I am doing more wedding planning stuff. That's always part of my day-to-day life until it actually happens. But I did actually get a chance to read some comics. I sat down and was I'm going to dig through some backlog. Of course, the books I'm going to talk about are not from my backlog. Instead, I'm going to talk about some new books. I read Berserker Unbound, number 1. This is from Jeff Lemire, Mike Diodato Jr. on art, with colors by Frank Martin and letters by Steve Wands. Basically, this is Jeff Lemire's alternative take on Conan, which I think is almost a weird dig at Marvel, because they now have the Conan rights. So Dark Horse is could you write a Conan book? But the first issue, there's not really much to say here as far as major story. We basically get to meet this character, the Berserker, and he is just a killing machine. That is his whole thing. He just kills people, and Mike Diodato Jr.'s art basically was made to show brutal fight scenes, not death scenes, not Crossed where it's bloody and gory and makes you sick. Mike Diodato Jr. has this incredible ability to make every single pixel, I guess I read it digitally, pixel of the page look like it's full of action, and it's so kinetic and there's so much movement. I just wanted, like, there's one page in particular that I just want to print out on like a huge wall mural. It is so beautiful of just this character just mowing through 100 different enemies at once, and there's no way he could be in all those places at once, and yet that's how it looks. There's just so much action, and god damn, this book is beautiful. The story essentially ends with our main character kind of showing up in, I realized I didn't write down his name and now I don't remember what it is, but he shows up in modern day New York in Central Park. But this book is beautiful, and I'm just going to keep reading it because it's Jeff Lemire. Dude kills it. Mike Deodato Jr. is probably one of the most talented artists like out there right now. This book is perfect. I mean, Frank Martin does some stupendous work on colors. That alone is worth mentioning because, like I said, this massive fight scene would probably be nothing without Frank Martin's art or colors. Holy crap, what a book. It's so action-packed. It's exactly what I think I needed. I think this is like how Xander has pitched Conan, the Marvel like run that Jason Aaron is doing to me. He feels like it's just this very action-packed, kinetic book. This is exactly what Berserker Unbound feels like. If you like Conan, if you like, Brian Wood's like Black Axe that he did. What was the book that he did? Is it Black Axe, Nick?
No, jeez. I thought you were going to say like Brian Wood's Conan.
Oh, Brian Wood's Conan. I mean,
you're
I
talking about
that,
the one with Gary Brown
way.
for Image. Oh, shit.
Yeah. If you like these like old style like barbarians trying to survive kind of books, I think this will probably be up your alley. But I have no idea what it looks like when this Conan-esque character shows up in modern day New York. So we're going to find out in issue 2, but man, oh man, this book is beautiful. I just had to bring that up because holy cow, I wrote goddamn with a million A's in the middle of my notes because the book deserves it. Just go check out the preview pages and tell me I'm wrong.
You've seen George of the Jungle, right, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be like that. It's just going to be him trying to like...
What did he say it's going to be like?
A little bit more dramatic.
George of the Jungle.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were going to say like Hercules in New York or whatever that Schwarzenegger movie is.
Black Road. That's the name of the book.
Yeah.
That's the name of the book. I will say...
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
We are recording right now, and we are on Discord, and we've got people chatting to us, so I want to say thank you to Danny for that. I just couldn't figure out what the name of that book was.
I'm just really interested to actually see... I mean, okay, I love Jeff Lemire. I love a lot of the people he collaborates with. Okay, let me say that up front.
Okay.
But that being said, I'm always interested to see him working with new people because I feel in some ways that Lemire has like 8 people, and I love all of those people, but I feel like he has 8 people on speed dial for most of his projects right now.
Oh yeah,
and that's fine.
Sure.
Like Andrea Sorrentino is fantastic. Matt Kinn is amazing. But it's always nice to see someone new.
For sure. And I think like if you like the work that he's done with Andrea Sorrentino, you're going to like the work that he's doing with the Berserker Unbound, because while I think Sorrentino and Deodato Jr., they have very different styles, the feeling that they emit in their books feels very similar. Like, I think the panel work is really interesting in Berserker Unbound. Like, I can't sell this book enough. It's very, very good. It was a killer #1, and I mean that pun intended. It's fantastic. So the other book I want to talk about real quick is Outer Darkness #9. This is John Layman, Afu Chan, Pat Brosino on letters. I don't care who you are. This is the most beautiful goddamn book on the stands. Hands down. Like, if you look at the cover of Outer Darkness #9, that's also like a panel in the middle of the book. And I don't know what it is, but I cannot stop looking at this art. Like, I get distracted looking at some of the full or half-page spreads that they do. Afu Chan's art is stupendous. I think John Layman is doing a wonderful job telling a Star Trek-like story about a bunch of shitheads with weird quantum physics, math, and arcane energies that people have to get exercised because space ghosts possess them and evil gods live in the basement of this ship and it powers it. Like, there's so much ridiculous stuff going on in this book. I just love it to death. But it doesn't feel like Chew, where it's all wacky comedy. Instead, it feels very serious, which is, I think, a very interesting change. But if you're not reading Outer Darkness, I think that's a mistake. You need to go grab Volume 1 because you'll be blown away by the art and then the story will hook you. Hands down. But let's move on. Let's talk about comics that are coming out this upcoming week. Comic books are dropping on August 21st, 2019. Let's hear what you guys are excited for. Let's start with you, Brian.
Well, I've got Star Wars TIE Fighter number 5 is dropping this week. This is going to be the last issue in the TIE Fighter miniseries. And I haven't read issue number 4 yet, so I have no idea what could have changed between the end of issue 3 and what's going to be happening at the beginning of 5. So, and this is a book that changes so fast, situations can be reversed so quickly, that it's kind of impossible for me to even speculate, which I do enjoy. Like, this is a book that keeps it moving. It keeps your attention. But yeah, I mean, you know me, I'm a sucker for these Star Wars books, especially the TIE Fighter series.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be interesting to see how it all shakes out, because I think that there's a real chance that this book is going to end with all of the main characters dying. Like,
good,
which makes sense. Like, they're TIE Fighter pilots.
Right.
Their purpose is basically to die screening hits for capital ships. Like,
I mean, that's the sad truth, right? If we break it all down.
That's why Brian is not the squad leader. Okay, everyone. That's why. Rousing speech. Hurrah, hurrah. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. It's almost like the Empire are the bad guys.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
You know the space Nazis.
They are merely trying to establish order.
No, wait, hold on, Nick. We're not getting into this. You don't even try. Nick, what are you excited for this upcoming week? We're just gonna move on.
For me, it would probably have to be Aliens Rescue number 2. I recently read number 1. I really enjoyed it. This is written by Brian Wood, penciled by Kieran McCown, inks by J.L. Straw, colors by Dan Jackson. So this follows the events of Resistance. Alex Brand, the colonist that Zula Hendricks and Amanda Ripley rescued, has grown up. Or, I mean, he wasn't that young in the first one, but whatever. He's joined the United States Colonial Marines. We get some backstory on him. And in a lot of ways, the framing device for the first issue reminds me a lot of in Aliens, when Ripley is woken up and is sort of debriefed, and you go through this whole process of her explaining what happened to her and what she encountered, and sort of people either choosing to believe or not really believe it or be skeptical. And in some ways, I think that's this. We're getting a similar framing device here. I really liked it. I thought there was a sort of sense of lightheartedness with it that I thought was kind of weird, but I enjoyed. We get to see some of his exploits with the Colonial Marines. We find out that apparently Mars actually has space bugs on it, but we would only find this out after we terraformed it and also nuked it 11 or 12 times. So,
nice.
Elon Musk's Tesla, I would be careful. And for the space bugs, Elon Musk doesn't care. He's blazing it somewhere.
He is a space bug, so.
McCown brings a more animated feel to the visuals than past efforts by pencilers like Tristan Jones and Robert Carey. Carey was sort of a step towards the animated feel of McCown, but McCown is definitely there for sure. He recently drew Halo Lone Wolf for Dark Horse with the exact same art team that he has on Aliens Rescue. And The Irishman was actually nominated for the 2019 Russ Manning Award, which is given out yearly at SDCC, given to a comic artist who, quote, early in their career shows us superior knowledge and ability in the art of creating comics. For a bit of trivia, those curious, I guess, the first winner of this award was Dave Stevens, who would go on to create The Rocketeer. Oh. So, that's some good company to have. He didn't win, but whatever, let's not worry about that. Honestly, what really brings a lot of this work together is J.L. Straw's inking. The past couple years, I would say definitely unfairly, I sort of developed a bit of an opinion that with some exceptions, there's nothing to be gained by pencilers not inking their own work. And usually there's something to lose when they don't. But I think that's because, and again, unfairly, I thought that having someone else ink your stuff is more about accelerating a collaborative process and less about the unique artistic contributions that come with it. Straw is definitely an example of why I'm wrong, or at least wrong sometimes. Straw has this real crosshatch style that reminds me a lot of Brian Beland, and I see this a lot on Twitter these days. Guys, it's flattering that you compared me to whoever. Like, I just want to be myself. I mean, first off, I guess don't we all? But that being said, like, when people compare you to Brian Beland, you want to be compared to Brian Beland. Okay? Just let it happen, all right? So, anyway, again, just I suppose...
I was going to say two names that we really need to talk about here are Klaus Janson and Dexter Vines.
Absolutely,
but, I'm not
absolutely,
gonna
and
get
that's
into that.
That's what I'm saying is, I developed that opinion, but obviously under there are exceptions to all rules, and I think obviously there are some pencilers who genuinely need their stuff inked by someone else.
Yeah. I mean, not necessarily need, but it can add a lot to the comic itself. Yeah,
and I think we've all seen a lot of the graphics or designs where they have different inkers ink the same penciler, and you can see how different people bring out different things. So, but I think part of like me, being part of the big two cynicism for a while was like you'd get a book, right, and there'd be like 3 colorists and like 2 inkers, and you'd be like, okay, what's going on here, right?
Yeah. I get you. Well, for me this week, I'm excited for Excellence number 4. This is Brandon Thomas with Kerry Randolph on art, colors by Emilio Lopez. What can I say? This book is insanely good. I mean, I've talked about it a couple times, and every single issue hooks me even harder than the previous one. There is a lot going on in this book that I don't want to try to explain. All I can say is that if you're sleeping on this book, it's a mistake. Just like Outer Darkness, I think Image actually has some pretty spectacular books coming out right now that I don't know if a lot of people are talking about. Excellence is one of those books, and I think Excellence has got a lot of press, but holy cow, I am just impressed. The cover for this book is very... interesting. It's someone like behind bars, like in a jail, but it's like a very interesting, clever way to show someone behind bars. So I'm really digging on this book. That's all I can really say. But I don't know if you guys had a chance to check this out. I really hope that you have.
This is the first time hearing about it.
Oh, okay. Cool. Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some very, very weird things. I'll just say that. We'll start with that. So let's take a break, and we'll be back. For our show this week, we are talking about, well, something really weird. We're calling it weird crossovers. Brian, Nick, and I kind of brainstorm an idea about what we should talk about this week, and we came up with the idea of what are the strangest, weirdest comic book crossovers that we could ever think of, or that we know exist in comics continuity in some capacity. Let's talk about the weirdest ones that we can find and just some overall thoughts. Quite honestly, I think I have the strangest one, but Nick, Brian, I want to hear your initial thoughts, maybe some examples of books that you guys were looking at for this episode.
Yeah, I did a lot of poking around, because I have a couple in my backlog, like Alien versus Vampirella was a really weird one. Turns out that the xenomorphs are not as dangerous when you kind of have to be killed by sunlight or stake in the heart or whatever. Mm-hmm. People like Vampirella just kind of survives a chest burster because it doesn't destroy her heart. So
nice.
That's that was weird. That whole book was weird.
How was the art on that book?
That was pretty good. I can't remember who did it because I read this like 2 years ago. But
okay,
it was. I mean, this is like a backhanded compliment. I guess it was good for a Dynamite book.
Okay, I don't know if that's a compliment or
I said
what.
It was backhanded.
Yeah, I mean, it was not so good that I remember it specifically being good, but it was not so bad that I remember it being bad. Like,
okay,
I guess that's the best way I can describe it.
Gotcha.
But that's my favorite thing to look for in a crossover like this, is just a weird scenario that would not ever normally happen. And vampires and aliens is kind of out there.
Generally, it falls into one of my favorite demographics, which is putting characters in space that have no business being in space.
Wait, so explain to me the story of this. Vampirella somehow goes to space to fight aliens or something? Is that what I'm understanding here?
Yeah, it's like some humans find an old vampire colony in space, maybe?
That sounds right.
Okay.
That tracks with me.
I mean,
I
I
should have reread it before talking about it, but
the synopsis that I'm seeing on Comixology is, as the first human colony on Mars digs deeper into the crimson soil, they discover the catacombs of a hibernating civilization tens of thousands of years old. The evidence suggests that they are Nosferatu, an ancient and sinister species that Vampirella is all too familiar with. Called to the Red Planet to investigate, the monster hunter and her human allies find a chamber with hundreds of ellipsoidal leathery eggs, and after they hatch, the true horror begins. Okay, so it's your standard alien storyline, but just with Vampirella on Mars for no good reason, I guess.
yeah.
Well, it's like Alien, but make it sexy, kind of.
Oh yeah, Alien
hold
wasn't
on.
already sexy
Yeah,
enough.
I was gonna. I mean, I
Exactly.
didn't want to say it, Brian, but it's like Alien's already kind of sexy.
Did you see that ovipositor? Man.
Excuse me, I'm just throwing up over here. Okay, that's a good one to start with. I know that there's a ton of Alien and someone else, and then Predator and someone else out there. I read the Archie versus Predator by Alex DeCampi with art by Fernando Ruiz. I think everybody and their brother who is familiar with comics kind of knows about this, or at least has seen a cover for this, and it makes no sense. You kind of look at it and you wonder, why does this exist? Can I resist buying this or reading this? Because it's so absurd. Especially given the art style, right? Like Fernando Ruiz's art is this happy-go-lucky, campy Archie style, and then also Predator is there, and it's fucking insane.
I feel like they had a discussion over, like, are we going to take Archie's art style, or are we going to take Predator aesthetics for this book? And for some reason, the coin toss was lost. Or won, depending upon how you feel about it. And we got
I
like
think
the
the book
Archie
is better because of
digest
that.
at the supermarket art, which is a million times better than what the alternative would have been.
Oh yeah, I think a realistic Archie and the gang would have failed compared to the campy look that the Archie Digest books, that's a great way to describe it, definitely has. Pre Fiona Staples reboot with Mark Waid, I think that style, I mean, they still publish books like that, which is great. But I think that style totally lends to the weird campiness of it, especially when the book gets very, very gory later on in the books.
I just saw the first issue of the sequel on the shelves at Vault, and I think Hack is actually drawing it. The guy who did Sabrina.
Whoa, that's what?
Yeah,
That's fucking
yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
For those of you who aren't familiar, the Sabrina series that they did, I can't remember what the name of it is, but like it had a very painterly, almost just truly horror style.
Really chilling. Yeah.
To see that, yeah, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Thank you.
No
And
pun
now that
intended.
you
I
said
totally
that.
forgot that was the name of it.
Yeah, I mean it's a very creepy looking book, and now to see that as the Archie versus Predator 2 sequel, oh man, that's almost. I might actually have to pick that one up rather than borrow it from someone.
Yeah, I also read Archie versus Predator last night, and there's just a scene where, like, everyone, like, there's blood dripping down on Archie and the gang, and no one is talking about it. And then we kind of just, like, pan up into the trees where Cheryl and Jason Blossom have been, like, eviscerated and dismembered by the Predator. Like,
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of Afterlife with Archie, where everyone is kind of okay with death, though I will say in Archie versus Predator, there are people getting murdered like every third page, and they're just kind of like, oh no, Dingle, and then they move on, or whatever that nerdy kid's name is, I can't remember.
The one that stuck out to me was Pops is going to cut a cake, and he's holding a knife. So the Predator blows up Pops' head, and, like, some of the head bits land on the cake. And then a few pages later, we see Jughead taking, like, a fork into the cake. Like,
listen, this was all just a precursor for Jughead the Hunger.
I guess.
We all know that.
It's like, holy shit, there's still an eyeball on that thing. And Jughead's like, oh, let's eat around it.
Well, he's hungry, Brian. That's his thing.
Yeah, and it gets motherfucker killed later, too.
Yeah. I mean, everyone practically dies in this book, with the exception of Betty, Veronica, and kind of Archie, depending on how you read it at the end.
Well, yeah. I mean, Betty, Veronica, and the Predator, because they do use a magic surgery machine to turn the Predator into Archie at the end.
Which is what we all want, right? Just a murderous death machine turned into our love triangle boyfriend.
Oh, that book was so weird.
Yeah, it's probably one of the strangest crossover books that has come out in modern printing. But I don't know, Nick, what do you got on your table? What are you looking at?
Well, one of them that I read, again, I didn't need much encouragement. I read the original Alien vs. Predator from 1990. And I think a lot of people who are sort of vaguely aware of the Aliens universe, they either they either think that like Alien and Predator were all part of some like massive planned story and whatnot from the beginning, or if they saw Predator 2, they're like, oh, there's a alien skull in Predator 2, and so clearly like that must have been the whole thing that tipped it off, when in fact a lot of people aren't aware unless you listen to this show, and then I bring it up every third week, that Alien versus Predator was actually just the result of, apparently, the writer, Randy Stradley. I read an interview with him yesterday, and he talked about how he was in a meeting with the founder of Dark Horse, Mike Richardson, and they were in this all-hands-on-deck meeting trying to figure out how they were going to do a crossover with DC Comics at the time. And then one of the other writers / artists, Chris Warner, just pointed out that they already were publishing Predator and Alien, and both were owned by the same company, so it would probably just take one phone call, and it didn't seem like there would be much plot needed to have them fighting each other, so he said it took like 5 minutes to close the deal with Fox, and that was it. And so, yeah, a lot of people aren't aware that it like, the franchise, which now has multiple video games and 2 or 3 movies, I think just 2, AVP and AVP Requiem, all just began because Dark Horse was trying to smash their characters together. It wasn't the first time they did that, wouldn't be the last time, but I don't know if we've ever had mashup result in such its own media empire, more or less. Empire might be strong. Well, franchise might be more appropriate.
In my opinion, I think the only other one that I can think of that's like that is Kingdom Hearts, and I don't want to dive down that rabbit hole. But
let's discuss the plot to all of the Kingdom Hearts games. We'll go in release order.
Right.
So
I don't want to get into that because that is the worst place to go. But Kingdom Hearts is a similar thing where I think it was like folks in Japan were in like the same building as folks from Disney, and they were like, "How do we make this happen?" Or not? Folks from who was it? Square Enix. Or Square at the
would
time.
Have been Squaresoft
they were
at
like,
the time, technically.
Yeah, Squaresoft. They were like in the same building, and they were like, "Let's make this happen." But there's a lot more story to it. I think you should Google it if you're interested. But so I guess I didn't realize that Alien and Predator, like them coming together in a comic, was so strange, because to me it feels supernatural. Well, that's a strange way to put that. It feels very natural because those books are like about aliens from other planets where people kind of show up on a planet and they're doing something. It fits really well, but I guess it was just a happenstance. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, of course, humans always get involved. I mean, it's always like Aliens versus Predator, parentheses, we're going to kill lots of humans because the 2 other creatures in this book don't speak English, and so someone's got to be doing the narrating, right? So,
yeah.
I really enjoyed this one. Again, written by Randy Stradley, pencils by Phil Norwood and Chris Warner, inks by Norwood, Carl Story, and Robert Campanelli, letters by Pat Brousseau. It feels like Pat Brousseau has been lettering since, I think 2 of the books you already talked about today were Pat Brousseau, so it seems like he's forever. It checked all the boxes for me. Any Aliens book that just has a prolonged introductory monologue that's about Darwin / survival of the fittest / ethics / evolution, and it goes on for about 7 times longer than it needs to. Like, that's like check the box. Like, that's, who is to say what is the fittest species of all time. Yeah, okay, we get it. We're watching an aliens movie. Thank you. Check the box.
Right.
But yeah,
well,
I mean, it really seeds the idea, no pun intended, that predators basically are punks, and they just roll onto planets and dump a bunch of alien eggs so that they can go have a hunt, more or less. And whoever gets hurt in the meantime, who cares? So,
right.
And then, of course, I mean, this book also checks the box for me that I love, which is there is a predator code of ethics, and it never matters. And that's... like predators don't hurt defenseless people, right? Like, that's part of it. And then you see this gang of predators arrive on this like western frontier home and just kill the mom right in front of the kid, and I'm like, okay. And then just the final big check mark for me, it's on every Predator's CV on LinkedIn, which is, have you crushed human skulls? And the answer has to be yes. Like, if you haven't done it, what are you doing?
It's like the Predator equivalent to like a high school degree or a GED. Like,
right.
You can get by without it, but it makes your life easier.
People are going to notice. Like, people are going to notice it. Yeah, you said you've crushed human skulls, but have you really? Okay, so.
Well, Nick, you've got a huge list. I don't know how much of these you read, because I only read a couple of things. Like, I did kind of dig through a little bit of the, like, Green Lantern and Star Trek crossover, and Brian, I think you did as well.
Yeah, I read that last night.
That crossover super works because, like, people in space and then people in space. I think that's a plan. Like, they just like, these things kind of naturally work, so we're going to push them together. I don't know if that makes it weird, or I don't know. Brian, you probably read through more of this than I did. Did you think that there was any weirdness to this crossover that they did?
I thought it was weird-ish because I wasn't reading Green Lantern at the time. Like, because it's definitely Star Trek Green Lantern: The Spectrum War is the full title, and it picks up with Necron about to kill Ganthet, the Guardian guy, and he escapes by jumping into the Star Trek movie universe, taking a ring of each color with him.
Okay.
But then they're like, Hal Jordan, like everybody who had a ring was also pulled into this universe. So like, Hal Jordan is there, and Jon Stewart, and I think Guy Gardner is the other Green Lantern who shows up. But then Sinestro's there, and Larfleeze is there, and the Rage guy. They all show up.
Keep naming them, Brian.
Yeah, just for the rest of the episode. Atrocitus, that's what it is. But last I read in any Green Lantern thing was when they beat Necron with Kyle Rayner turning into the White Lantern. So I was a little confused by it. But then they throw in a couple pages of backstory where they're like, yeah, Necron attacked again and he killed Kyle first, so we're all fucked. They say like he just like showed up, capped Kyle Rayner, and moved on with his day.
So this book, it takes place in the Star Trek cinematic universe. Like, do the Green Lanterns just fucking win because they have superpower rings? Like, Star Trek is still very based on, like, human survival. Like, no one is, like, superpowered by any means unless, like, you're talking about the Klingons' ability to survive. I mean, I don't know enough about Star Trek to speak to it. I don't even want to try to.
Yeah.
But it seems like the Green Lanterns would just kick ass. Right?
Well, what ends up happening is a Klingon, I can't remember his name, General something or other, gets a yellow ring because Scotty is fucking around with the rings they found. Oh yeah, they find Ganthet's body, and they find all the rings, and Scotty, like, reactivates them somehow. And so, like, a Klingon gets the yellow ring.
He's giving him all he's got, Captain.
Some lizard guy gets the red ring, a Romulan gets the orange ring. And then a few member of Kirk's crew get the other rings, and it's a whole thing.
Okay,
they're like,
I mean,
powering phasers with lantern rings, and like Chekhov is flying through space, fucking shit up. Like,
Sweet. Okay.
it's
So it just goes whole hog on this thing, is what you're saying.
it's a real fun read, honestly. I recommend it.
Okay. That's it. I saw that one. Like I said, I kind of paged through it because I saw that they were trying to do the likeness of like the modern day Star Trek characters, which in some panels looked good. In other panels, like I feel so bad for Simon Pegg, just because they make him look like a lemur in one panel, and I was just like, oh no,
Ooh.
what happened? But otherwise, like, it looked kind of cool. I'm glad to hear that it was a fun read ultimately. The book that Nick, you've got a list, and I just want to go through. There's like Batman versus Predator. There's Superman versus Predator. Like, how do those books work as stories? When doesn't it seem like the aliens, or excuse me, Predator would beat Batman, but Superman would beat Predator? Like, is there even a challenge there? Like, what's the story in those books?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't read that one yet, and it makes even less sense to me because I think the summary mentioned that it was like the Superman story was during the era when it was like 4 different Supermen. So it's like, how is it?
Oh, okay.
It should be 1/4 of a struggle now.
Yeah, I didn't read that book, but I read a little blurb about it, and it takes place on a planet with a red sun. That's how Predator has a chance.
Okay.
All right, so they cheated. Anyway,
field.
on to the next one.
Yeah.
So Batman has fought the Predator 3 times. He's also fought aliens 2 times. There have been 2 Predator versus Judge Dredd versus Aliens books, which is actually a bit of a misnomer because one of those books is actually a collection of when Judge Dredd fought the Predator and when Judge Dredd fought the aliens, and they were packaged together into the same book and titled that, which gets super confusing because 2 years after that book came out, there was actually a book that came out called Predator versus Judge Dredd versus Aliens by John Layman and I think Chris Mooneyham, which used the same title but actually involved all 3 in the same story. Does that make sense? I know that's a very comics narrative there, but to follow.
Yeah, I'm following you.
Okay. I mean, there are some other really wild ones. There's 1 or 2 I just really want to bring up. You can list the rest at some point. There was Tarzan versus the Predator at the Earth's Core. Came out in 1996. I simultaneously want to read this book this very instant, and yet also possibly never if I can help it. But Walt Simonson wrote it, and Lee Weeks did the pencils. So it's like, what the hell?
What?
Right? Isn't that? It's always so weird to see. I mean, it's no different than when you see a movie star like 10 years before they hit it big, and here's, Brie Larson and Scott Pilgrim. Although, I mean, Scott Pilgrim's not exactly a low-profile movie, but you see my point, right? All of a sudden, you're finding people in these movies, and you're like, well, this is weird. Comics is no different. Same sort of thing. There was a Star Trek X-Men crossover, which happened in 1996. It only happened because at that point, Marvel Comics briefly owned Paramount Pictures. It did involve Spock fucking laying out Wolverine at one point.
Yeah,
it was written by Scott Lobdell, which means you don't need to read it. And featured art by such individuals as David Finch and Mark Silvestri. So...
Yowza.
But there's one that I really want to talk about. And that's definitely the 2009 Eminem / The Punisher crossover.
No, wait.
Shut up.
Wait, Eminem, like the rapper, not the candy?
Like the rapper.
I guess that makes a little more sense.
I guess. Well, I mean, I guess the candies would have been a whole mess of a story, but Eminem the rapper, what is this comic even about then? Hold on, am I reading this right? The credits are Fred Van Lente and Salvador LaRocca? What?
Yes. Yeah.
Nick, explain this book to me right now, or else.
So, this came out in 2009, and it was largely done to promote Eminem's upcoming album for the same year, Relapse. The first half came out in XXL magazine. Don't ask me what that's about or what it's for. I don't know. I don't want to ask. which had Eminem cosplaying as the Punisher on the cover, and the second half was made available on Marvel's website. Apparently, Marvel got into this, and then they were like, maybe we need to do some damage control, because where is this going to go, really, right? And so they tried to convince Eminem, hey, we're thinking we're going to do a story, and it's going to be about you, and it's going to feature Wolverine and Spider-Man. How's that? And he's like, nope, I've already decided I want it to be Punisher. And they're like, well, fuck.
I guess.
I fucking guess, sure.
And apparently he really does love the Punisher, because when Netflix canceled the Punisher, Eminem sent them an all caps text which read, "Dear Netflix, I wrote you, but you still ain't calling. I left my cell phone, my pager, and my home phone at the bottom." I'm kidding. That's not what it said. Anyway, that's Stan. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, you're killing me.
He wrote in all caps, "Dear Netflix, regarding your cancellation of The Punisher, you are blowing it," 2 exclamation points after that, which is a real power move. Like 1 and 3 are both very conventional, but when you do 2, that means you fucked up. Okay?
Yes.
Sincerely, Marshall. Very polite. So apparently in this comic, the Parents Music Council hires Barracuda. Apparently it's a Punisher villain. Punisher villains tend to die frequently, so I don't know if this guy means anything to anyone else. Doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah. He's he's like a Jigsaw, which is another kind of classic Punisher villain that's been around for a while and has somehow managed to not die.
Okay. So they hire him to put a hit on Eminem. So Barracuda's plan is to dump Eminem in the ice on some lake near Detroit, which again, it's ice, so maybe he could have thought that through. So he's going to dump him in the ice where nobody can find him, and he purchases a lot of Eminem merch so that he can make a fortune after Eminem dies.
Okay.
Except Eminem hightails it across the ice, and he finds a middle-aged man ice fishing, who's ice fishing while listening to Eminem on his iPod. Don't let anyone tell you multitasking isn't possible. It is. Here's proof.
Yeah.
So Eminem finds out that this guy is his biggest fan, which has got to be factually true. And he lets M borrow his chainsaw for purposes that are probably not restricted to fishing.
Yes.
I will say this, I think if this book had to achieve one goal above all others, it would be, does Eminem actually look like Eminem? To which the answer is, yeah, absolutely. And if you've seen Salvador Larroca's work on Star Wars books, at least for most of the Star Wars faces he's attempting to emulate, he nails it. So that won't be a surprise for some people. But, yeah. I need to read this book.
So I honestly don't want you to tell me the ending. I want to know what happens. I feel like I need to find this book and read it. This is fucking insane. I thought that I had the topper for this episode. I mean, I maybe still do, because that's what we're going to talk about next. But holy shit, this is insane. I cannot believe it's a real thing. I can't believe the names on this book either.
Yeah.
This is incredible.
Apparently he's a huge comics fan. I guess when he was in rehab and trying to kick drugs and alcohol, he said, comic books were kind of what filled that void for him. He was talking about this on the Jonathan Ross show, who's a massive comic books fan himself. And according to the article I read, which it was on the internet, so don't believe any of it, apparently after the interview, they both literally just went to Jonathan Ross's house and sat around and read comics, which sitting
so
around
cool.
reading comics with Eminem sounds like something I would probably at least want to see, but maybe not be there.
Right. Oh man. Well, okay. We got to wrap this show up soon, so I got to tell you guys about probably the greatest crossover book that I actually read last night. This is Sonic Super Special number 7.
How the
this
fuck
came
did you
out
find this? I've read about
Listen, Nick.
this.
Listen, Nick. I read this last night, and it is the most insane book I've ever read in my life. It is written by Ken Penders with pencils by Jim Valentino, inks by Ken Penders, and letters by Jeff Powell. Oh my sweet God. Let me just tell you that I thought this book was just going to be a crossover between Sonic and Spawn. And you have to ask yourself, how the hell do Sonic and Spawn cross over? Well, guys, I just want to tell you that a lot happens in this book. The story opens on this character named Particle, who ends up going to Sonic's world using some magical device that she has. She finds a Chaos Emerald that has an image property trapped inside of it, a Elephant Man. She's telling this story to a, quote, Agent Mully and a, quote, Agent Scolder. And it only gets better from there because it's the fucking 90s. There's a kid who's hanging out in his room. They find like this business card that says, hey, turns out that something happened at this Air Force base. We should go investigate it. We found this business card. It belongs to some guy who works in the upper 70s of Manhattan. That's the upper 70s streets in Manhattan. And his son was somehow at this Air Force base. Turns out because that kid is fucking Shadowhawk. The kid has an Archie t-shirt on. He's telling this story about how he happened upon this alleyway where Sonic and the gang had somehow managed to show up in the material world, like the world that we live in, where Shadowhawk and Spawn live as well. And they're like, hey, do you know what happened to this Chaos Emerald? We're looking for it. And the kid happens upon them, and he thinks that they're just children dressed up as video game characters, because canonically, Sonic in the game, they are video game characters in the Spawn universe or whatever. So one of the characters, I don't know the Sonic gang, Sonic fans get at me, I don't know, they have this tracker that's able to track the Chaos Emerald, and I actually have to ask a question really quick. Maybe you guys know, why does Knuckles wear mittens but Sonic has finger gloves? Do you guys know why?
Oh,
don't
boy.
answer that, it's fine.
Yeah.
You're asking
Sonic
for
fans,
logic
get at
behind
me.
Sonic lore. I think you've just made a real wrong turn.
Yeah, I got
The only good thing
so
is
they're
that
like-
Sonic fans live to be upset and disappointed, so they will love coming after you.
Yeah. So the Sonic and the gang are asking directions for Spawn. That's like the whole thing. This kid is like, oh, I kind of can help you find your way around New York. They end up at Grand Central Station for some reason. And who do they run into? Well, they run into Savage Dragon, who's just patrolling on the street because that's who he is. And a fight breaks out. The Sonic gang are driving this special car they don't know what came from. There's a little footnote that says, in case you don't know who Dr. Robotnik is, and they give this little synopsis. And I'm like, I'm reading a Sonic comic. Of course I fucking know who Dr. Robotnik is. But there's this superhero called Union that shows up. There are these enemies called SWAT bots that work for some villain whose name I didn't really track. Because at this point, reading the book, I was just flipping through pages going, who the fuck else is going to show up? Because I couldn't believe it. There's a dig on DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths. The Max shows up. Velocity shows up. Everyone's getting punched. It turns out that they need Sonic speed because this is a Sonic comic, and Velocity she can keep up, but Sonic says, I haven't even gotten started yet. And then he goes faster. Knuckles has a crisis of faith mid-fight on whether or not he should do the right thing and save this material world from the Chaos Emerald, because I don't know Knuckles' background, but I guess he was a bad guy, and he's got this thing in his brain where he like wants to constantly be evil. I honestly couldn't keep up. For some reason, honestly, off panel, Knuckles beats the villain. There's like a page, and then all of a sudden the villain is beaten. There's no like action of them fighting. He's just beaten. And then Scolder and Mully think that it was all just a big shared hallucination between this kid and Savage Dragon and the Union and Velocity. They're like, there's no way these video game characters could have ever come to life. Honestly, I skipped a bunch at the end because none of it was making sense. You guys, it's the wildest fucking crossover book I've ever read in my entire life.
I mean,
That's all.
I just want to congratulate you on finding America's newest street drug.
What's that?
That book. Like,
Yeah, honestly, you should just inject that straight into your veins and you won't ever have to think about anything in life ever again.
I mean, I think what's weird is I'm framing this book as someone who is familiar with Sonic, reading and encountering all of these other characters, but fucking wrap your head around this book if you're a Spawn fan who's just rolled on into this thing, right? Like, what the hell?
It's so it's so strange to see Jim Valentino drawing Sonic and the gang because they do look comically cartoonish. Meanwhile, all of the Image characters look very grim and 90s. So like it's very impressive to see Jim Valentino like draw two different styles in one page, but on the whole, this book is just like a cash grab. It feels like a very hard cross promotion in order to make money. I don't know if it did well, but I had to find this book, and so last night I did. Man, it's strange. Man, it's weird. There's so many digs and plays against like the big two. Like it feels so Rebels 90 style where like the Image guys were just trying to give the middle finger to the big two because they weren't working for them anymore. So there's tons of digs against Marvel and DC on top of their characters being obvious ripoffs of some bits and pieces of other Marvel and DC characters. It's so ridiculous. And then Sonic and the gang are there. And honestly, there's a bunch of characters that I don't know. Like I know Sonic and Knuckles and Tails, but there was someone named Antoine who's like this love. Like he almost reminds me of Pepe Le Pew, and he's also French. There is Sally who's there, who's like this geek who can build computer things. There's this big chubby chipmunk guy who is their mechanic. I don't know enough about Sonic lore, man.
Did you ever
it was
watch the cartoon?
Strangest thing. No, I never watched the cartoon.
Sonic was played by Steve Urkel in one of them.
Oh, well, thank you for the factoid.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the strangest crossover. I don't know. Do you guys have any other final thoughts on this? I know we could keep going. I just had to get that out of my system because I read it last night, and it's just been itching me. And I don't know if they actually figured out the Elephant Man thing trapped inside the Chaos Emerald. I wasn't paying enough attention. But yeah. Brian, I don't know. What are your thoughts here?
I don't know if there's anywhere else we can go from there. Like, I think that might have to be the end.
I don't know. I mean, probably the closest, wildest thing I could find was that there were not one but two Aliens / Witchblade / Darkness / Predator crossovers in 2000, which
Yowza.
I mean,
that sounds like a sexy book? Question mark.
I mean, like sex and violence in ample amounts, yeah, and a fair share of brooding, to be sure, yeah,
for sure. Well, okay, then I guess we're just gonna wrap things up because I feel like mentally drained after talking about all.
Yeah,
of that.
I gotta lay down.
Exactly. So, if you guys want to follow us, we recorded this whole episode and we were on Discord. So if you guys aren't on our Discord, check the show notes. There's a link you can join and you can listen to future things. We're doing a live episode on August 30th. Brian and I are going to just sit down and hang out. We're going to talk about something comics related and then maybe just spin off into whatever for a little bit of time. So if you can make it, please do. You can follow us all on Twitter. You can follow Brian at BrianHead. You can follow Nick at Death Star Plans. You can follow me at Mike Rappin, and you can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at IRCB Podcast.
We would love to have you subscribe to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/IRCB Podcast. Without your support, the show wouldn't survive. If you join now, you can get access to exclusive audio and articles, early access to top of my pile posts, as well as early access to episodes as you'll be getting them on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. In addition, you can check out our Goodreads group. It's a wonderful community of comic friends, and we have weekly threads. This week's thread is that we are currently voting, or rather, we're taking nominations for September's Book of the Month. So if you want to head on over and take a look at that, we would really love to have your input.
You can also find us at our website, ircbpodcast.com, where we have a pronunciation guide and a merch store. If you're listening to us through iTunes, Google, whatever, please remember to rate and review the show. We love reading your reviews. We'll probably read them out loud on an episode of the show. And they really do help people find us. We have over 200 episodes. We should have 200 reviews at least, right? Email the show with whatever you want, what you've been reading, corrections, recipes, fanfic favorites, at ircbpodcast@gmail.com.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. Their new album drops, I believe, next week, so make sure you go purchase that. They are such cool guys. I really love all their music, and we can't thank them enough for letting us use their music on our show. Xander is a really cool guy, really fun wizard to play, magic shoot-em-ups with. He's also the editor of our show, and he's fantastic. I want to say thank you to Brian and Nick for being on the episode. Thank you to the guys in the Discord just chatting with us, Cinco, Danny, VG, Aaron. I know you were here for a second, too. Thank you, guys. So until next time, comics are good, and so are you.
I mean, Danny, for the record, we say these things, but we don't go to the bathroom. We don't drink water. These are those are human activities. You should. Yeah, true.
Yeah, I was gonna plug, Powers of X, but I figured I gotta not just do that for the next 12 episodes of the show, because I don't think it's fair to the rest of the other comic books that I'm reading. I know it's very on brand. Paul, when we came back, when he did that, like, here's your X-Men minute, I genuinely considered doing that for like the next 12 episodes of the show, even for the 2 that I know that I'm not going to be on, to just like have someone check in with some like pre-written something that I've written, even if they have no idea what the context is. But I don't have enough brain power for that. Otherwise, I would have done it.
I mean, someone tell me, like, is this whole Hox Pox? I feel like it's a secret language. First off, obviously, is this like the absolute disease, worst time or the absolute best time to be trying the X-Men? Or are you guys just saying this because it's fucking the whole tinfoil hat shit's going around, and that's basically me?
No, I think Cinco is definitely right. Like, it's definitely like a place to jump on. I think Marvel's trying to do a soft reset as far as the X-Men, because I think for the last 3-ish years, they've been kind of meandering with an uncertainty of what to do. The whole Inhuman Terrigen bomb that was kind of Marvel's push to try to make the Inhumans like the next big thing ultimately flopped because ultimately...
Sorry, it's honestly, still funny to hear that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it flopped because like the Inhumans are not the X-Men. They aren't the flawed humans that we know. Instead, they're bound by this weird, rigid system. And yes, as much fun as it is to see characters kind of rebel against that rigid system and maybe not even be a part of it, and someone like Kamala Khan, for instance, perfect example. She's a fantastic character, and her book works well because she is a good character, and her life isn't revolved around the Inhuman like doctrine. And instead, all the other books that they were pushing at the time, if I remember correctly, they were all just like, we used to be part of this kingdom, and now we're not. What do we do? Where's our king? And that's like the constant storyline. Everyone's like, where's Black Bolt? What are we supposed to do?
Right?
Yeah, and Danny got a point, like,
or whatever
Charles
they're called,
Soule,
I don't know.
He wrote some really good Inhumans, but like, I ultimately don't think Marvel had a solid plan as to how to basically push the X-Men out. And instead, they gave Jeff Lemire Extraordinary X-Men, which was a really weird book because it was like a flash forward by a year. And then we got Charles Soule writing Death of X, and where Cyclops quote unquote died, except for he didn't, because we didn't see the body. They followed basic horror tropes where they were like, we didn't see the body, so therefore he's not dead. Though I do think that they did show his body. Either way. Oh no, they did, because it was Emma Frost projecting it or something like that. It's a bunch of fucking retcon garbage. But yeah, I think this House of X and Powers of X is them trying to like do a soft reboot of the X-Men, kind of rewrite a little bit of history, solidify some of the history that they want to bring into continuity, and then go from there. And any references to characters that you're going to get, yes, it's going to be hard. Like if they bring up Mojo or they bring up fucking Mr. Sinister, you're kind of not going to know who they are, but they'll teach you along the way that these are villains and this is why they're bad and this is who they become. And I think that, the stuff that they were doing in Uncanny X-Men, X-Men Gold, I honestly really enjoyed Mark Guggenheim's run because it was basically like a slightly warmer than lukewarm X-Men run where there was enough nostalgia to bring in old X-Men fans and there was enough new content to kind of hook a handful of interested X-Men fans. But ultimately, like, things fell apart because Marvel didn't know what to do after that, which is why they did Age of X-Men, which is like a, hey, what if scenario. They did this a few years ago with Age of X. I don't know why they're obsessed with calling things Age of something, but they are. And now this whole Hoxpox thing is them saying, okay, this is a new age of something, but it's actually going to have ramifications, and we'll see how long that lasts. But I'll give them like 2 years to say like, hey, we're going to try something new with the X-Men for a couple of years, and it'll be interesting. Like when I was at FlameCon, Vita Ayala was talking about how they get to write what they want and they get to, put their opinions and things into their books, but ultimately whatever Jonathan Hickman says is law. He essentially is writing the new continuity, and so they can't, as people write these new books that are coming out after Hoxpox, they have to adhere to whatever continuity he sets up. And I think that, like, Vita, for instance, is aware. Leah Williams is aware. They all know kind of what's happening. Teenie Howard, for instance, as well, which is why we're getting a Morbius book for some reason, which is somebody said is supposed to be like an X-Men book. I don't know, but yeah, it's a whole thing. But yeah, there's a bunch of X-Men books coming out in the fallout from Hoxpox that we're gonna see actually change continuity. So I think, like, if you wanted to dive in and get the big deep dive Hickman style, like pamphlet-esque comic book, because they're like pages of just prose for a little bit, that I think are really interesting. I know some people are complaining about. I fucking love it. It's a nice like break between his story beats, just like Black Monday Murders, for instance. If you like what he did with Black Monday Murders, you're going to love House of X and Powers of X. Specifically, House of X, I think, is the better of the two right now, but Powers of X or Powers of 10 are like weird. The Powers of 10 is a weird book. Yeah. But I haven't read Powers of 10 number 2 yet, and I'm sorry, guys. I know that this is me like fucking up really hard over here.
Yeah, Mike, how could you be behind on reading comic books?
I don't know.
It feels like Marvel sometimes doesn't seem obsessed with getting new people on board with X-Men in the same way that they are with everything else, but maybe that's just generally speaking to the level of attention and care that they have for X-Men versus everyone else.
Well, I think that X-Men are less, I don't want to say popular, but they're less visible. Right?
Well,
like,
sure.
Captain
I
America,
mean,
like,
that boils down on some level
basically
to just the simple fact that they're not in the MCU, right? Like, that is the highest point of viewership awareness that exists right now,
Yeah.
And they're not in that.
Admittedly, I'm not plugged in enough on the other Marvel books to be able to speak to how new reader approachable they are. Like, for instance, we read Captain America Winter in America, that the Captain America book that came out by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I read it and I felt like it was a tough book to get into unless you knew some of the stuff that kind of led into it, but ultimately it wasn't a bad read. It's just like
I might as
the
well
story
have read that
itself
book
was
in
driven
French,
out of some
honestly.
Well, no, it's honest. It was like you had to have been kind of clued into what was happening with the Captain America thing from Nick Spencer, but they do a good job of explaining it to you. But it did feel like I was missing a little bit for having not read that. But that's me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Marvel on the whole, I think, is doing well. Like I agree with you, Cinco. Like, obviously people are digging it. Like, Absolute Carnage is a fucking nationwide event or something like that. Is there going to be like a Mountain Dew branded fucking promotion for this? It feels like it's huge.
That book is being pushed so hard. When I was in Vault, like, they were so excited about that book, and I was
like,
I mean,
if my Twitter timeline is any proof, I think like Absolute Carnage is taking over the United States. But maybe that's just a bit of
make any friends. But like, I don't know why people are excited about like Edgelord Venom, right?
Hey, I don't know what it is either, but people love it. People are really into it. I mean, Donny Cates is apparently doing a good job.
Oh, I mean, yeah, and it's not to speak to, Cates,
Danny
but
Cates,
it's
Donny
just,
Cates? What's his name? Yeah.
I don't understand the all of the symbiote love and everything.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, I mean, this is the
90s
thing, like,
kids love it. Yes, Danny. I think that's exact. I mean, Carnage for me is so very 90s.
Well, I think like Venom and in general,
guys, he was
like
a serial killer. Isn't that fucking badass?
it's Venom as a character is so weird because essentially, like, you can make a bad movie like the Venom movie. Like, I don't care what you say. Venom is not a good movie. It is a fun movie.
I haven't seen it. I've heard it described as a good bad movie or a bad good movie, however you want to call it.
It's like 80 minutes long. I don't know. Like, it was such a short movie. You can make a movie like that, and somehow it can do very well at the box office. Like something happened to people in the 90s that made them just love Venom, and I don't know what it is. I don't understand it. Todd McFarlane, I don't know, but like even today, to this day, before even the Venom movie came out, you still see people wearing Venom shirts or black Spider-Man shirts. Like something about that era of Spider-Man.
It's got to be just the fact that people love the Spider-Man design, right? But like they don't want, goody two-shoe science fair winning nerd.
Right. Everyone wants a like angry, flesh-hungry.
He needs to be a little moody.
Beast.
Like, we want Peter Parker, but he needs to be in My Chemical Romance.
Listen, we got that. It's called Spider-Man 3, end joke.
That was the thing that threw me in the Venom movie, was him eating people. Is he always eating people?
I don't know. I don't understand how, like, they were so passive with that. Like, he kills that dude at the end of the movie, and he's like, oh, sorry, Mrs. Chen, and he, like, leaves, which... That's my best Tom Hardy doing a bad Brooklyn accent in L.A.
Which was the Venom in space?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Mrs. Chen.
Was that the one you're talking about, Danny? Because I always heard that one was good.
The Agent Venom I heard was good.
I forgot about the turd in the wind line.
Yeah, turd in the wind. Okay, sorry. We have to get going. I actually do have to get on a plane in like 2 hours, so I need to finish up this recording. As much as I would love to do this, I promise August 30th, that Friday, Brian and I are going to be online. I'm going to try to convince Nick and Paul or whoever to come on as well, and we're going to do this exact thing, and we're just going to sit and chat about stuff. So we will get back to this, I promise. But let's jump into the second half of this episode. Let's take a break, or let's take a couple seconds so we can get into it if you guys are all ready.
Yep.
Yep.
All right.